So the claim I'm responding to is that a vegetarian lifestyle demonstrates more beneficial effects on the environment than a meat-centered diet. My counterclaim is that the evidence to support the claim is weak. This is because there is no evidence to actually show the beneficial effects that the vegetarian lifestyle is claimed to have, and focuses on the detrimental effects that only a small amount of meat have, and uses that as a standard for meat-centered diets. Now, the secondary claims that the advocate has is that first one being that less water is wasted, second, that less meat eaten increases the biodiversity, third, being a vegetarian has less harmful effects on the ozone layer. Now, going back to the first claim, where less water is wasted, the evidence used here is misleading, as it doesn't take into consideration the different types of meat and the different amounts of water used for each meat, as well as focusing only on 3 meats, leaving out how much water is also used for dairy and egg industries, which is part of the vegetarian diet. And now, for the first source given in this claim is that is from the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition, 2006, and it only talks about cattle. And it states that water is used to quench their thirst, clean stables, and milking halls, slaughterhouses, and so on. This, however, doesn't cover the topic of animal feeds in general, nor does it state how much water we use overall on the animal feeds, specifically for meat industries. And the source that we are given uses cattle feed for both meat and dairy industries, which in that itself is problematic, as dairy products are included in the vegetarian diet. And as for the second source, from Betty Hollock, that mentions how much water is used for chicken, pork, and beef. Those are the only 3 meats mentioned, and doesn't mention any other type of meats. 2 important meats that are not included are insect meat and seafood. PBS News reported that 80% of the world's population eats insects as a regular part of their diet, therefore making it an important type of meat to leave out, despite us not necessarily eating it so much. This is especially considering that not much water is used to water insects, as insects use less than 1 gallon of water, therefore making it inaccurate to assume that meat-centered diets in general use more water, especially if you take seafood into consideration, when we don't need to water seafood as we get from the ocean. Although how much water is used for some individual foods are mentioned, such as those 3 meats, beef, pork, and chicken. We only know the amount of water used for each of those individual foods, but we don't know how much water we use overall on all of those meats, and we don't know whether or not we actually spend more on meats versus other products that don't have meat. As for the secondary claim, it assumes that eating meat decreases biodiversity. Although, however, we're only given one source for this claim, and it doesn't talk anything about diets necessarily. It covers the topic of livestock production and how habitat loss is associated with it. However, this only deals with the way that livestock is managed and does not address specifically the relationship between meat-centered diets and biodiversity. The claim also leaves out agriculture related to the egg and dairy industries that also affect livestock. ABC News made a report in which researcher Stephen Davis from Oregon State University states that millions of animals are killed every day, says Davis, to prepare land for growing crops. So this further showing how, regardless of whether it's meat or dairy or egg industries related, animals will suffer regardless, as well as harvesting crops. Now, for the third secondary claim, it states how being a vegetarian has less harmful effects to the ozone layer, but doesn't have evidence that focuses on vegetarian diets. The first source from the European Environment Agency provides nothing related to the diet, and instead provides information purely on the ozone layer and climate change, which isn't inaccurate but doesn't support the claim. The second source from Tamar Haskell provides information relating to methane that is contributing to the climate change, which is accurate, but beef is the only type of meat mentioned in this source. The source itself states that beef has the highest environmental cost, and at no point it addresses meat-centered diets as a whole. Now, therefore making it problematic to assume that methane gas is a reason for meat-centered diets being detrimental to the ozone layer, when beef is the only one mentioned here. This is especially considering that only a selected few few meats. When insects and seafood are taken into consideration, they do not produce significant amounts of methane. SciDev.net has an article that states that compared to cattle weight for weight, insects emitted 80 times less methane. And Energy.gov has an article that says for fish, well, they produce methane hydrate, which is either warmed or depressurized and will revert back to water and natural gas. The methane is an issue also not limited to just beef industry, but as well as dairy industries, as they also use cows. So in addition, the claim specifically states being vegetarian has less harmful effects to the ozone layer, but doesn't provide anything related to vegetarian diets from these two sources that were provided. In conclusion, the claim of fact is weakly supported by the evidence provided to the audience. The advocate generalizes meat-centered diets by limiting it to a few animal meats and provides no evidence to demonstrate the actual beneficial effects of a vegetarian lifestyle.
Well, the structure is easy to follow. I can see the three main points that you're going into. The issue on water on the first point is, you challenge it by suggesting that there are other kinds of meats that are consumed that don't use the same amounts of water. Okay, I can understand that, except I don't know what percentage of the diet those things make up. Although 84% of the population of the world eats insects, I'm not exactly sure that that means that that's a substantial part of their daily diet, and that they, in essence, are replacing all the animal proteins with that. I guess in the long run, your better argument here is that we don't have enough information on water usage. We don't know how much water there is, what percentage of the water that's used goes to the meat production that's being talked about, and the fact that some of these things use so much water does not necessarily mean that there is a problem with the water that is available. And how it relates to the environment is, I think that's another place where you kind of suggest a press, but I think you're missing an opportunity to focus on that a little bit more. You get distracted by the dairy cows and the other kinds of things, which I understand. That's an attempt to diminish the advocate's significance a little bit, and it's an okay press to make. On the second point, you've got a similar kind of argument here about the dairy cows and the egg industry and how they're going to be part of this process. This is the methane from the cows and all that kind of thing. It's okay. It's, again, a reasonable press. I don't know what it gets you in the long run, though, when you talk about all of the cattle being killed in order to build or to have land available for crops. Even if that's true, how does that influence the validity of the argument that the advocate's presenting? I do think you have a good general press suggesting that none of the evidence is specific to what the impact of a vegetarian diet would be. It's all just talking about what some of the negative effects of meat production are, and the assumption that there's an automatic trade-off is something that the advocate hasn't really demonstrated. And I think that's a good press, but I think it could be a stronger argument if you had some more data on a couple of those points. The ozone layer one, it's okay. Again, I don't know that the insect argument helps you at all. In fact, it seems like it goes the other direction. They'd be perfectly happy to let people consume insects. I don't think that that's the kind of thing when they're talking about a vegetarian diet, that they're worried about the insects. But if you think that that's what they're talking about, and they're less, the fact that they're 80 times less gassy than cows, that seems to suggest that we don't really have a lot to worry about from the insects at all, one way or the other. that makes the point mostly irrelevant. So I think you're diminishing the argument a little bit, but you're not getting much further than that. All right, thank you.